Hey y'all, so it is one of those days. We are here to review The Real Housewives of New York. It's the reunion part 2 of season 14, so we are finally wrapped up. I watched the live version, like live television on Bravo, and then I waited till the next day and I watched it on Peacock. And Peacock always says there's like some like unseen footage or whatever the heck, however they categorize it. But this is like the first thing that I've watched on Peacock versus Bravo where I felt like there were some stark differences. So I'll discuss. This part I feel like was way better than the first. Like the first part of the reunion, I felt like Andy was just kind of like reading from the cards, and we were talking about just regurgitating stuff from the season that really didn't matter. It felt very like introductory compared to this part. So, I guess. But as an entire package, like part 1 and 2 together, I feel like they ran well, and this part made the reunion worth watching for me. We start the reunion though with Andy. We're back on the thing with where we left off with like Jessel versus Aaron and Sai, and Jessel expressing that she's upset because they implied all season, that Pavitt was cheating on her because of this whole going to Vietnam thing. So we're back in that. And obviously they're not admitting that they implied it at this point. And Andy asks something that I thought was very weird. He addresses Jessel and he's like, well, did you tell them that you were going through all of these things, like postpartum and everything, when you guys had the conversation about you not being intimate with Pavitt? And I think it was Sai also that was just like, and maybe Jenna, that was just like, yeah, like if we had known all of those things, like that you were going through postpartum and that it was such a serious situation, like we never would have made light about it and implied that your husband was cheating on you. So, but I just don't agree with that. Like, that sounds like a justification to me. Like, why do I need to tell you that? Like, you should be able to infer as a grown adult that there are a multitude of reasons as to why, especially as married people. Well, Jenna, you have been married and Sai's married. There are breakdowns in relationships, and there's just levels to things, and there are going to be, rhymes and reasons to everything that don't lead to cheating. So it's like, grow up, and I don't want to hear that. They did have a segment where they talked about the cackling hag thing. I feel like they talked about it a little bit more on Bravo and a little bit less on Peacock, and then they kind of pushed past it, as I'm going to do right now, because who cares? This did segue us into Jenna, though, because we talked about, Andy said, well, Sai, it seems like, I think it was a question on the card. Sai, it seems like, the breakdown of your relationship with Jessel started when she offended Jenna, about the pajama things when they were in the Hamptons. And I had forgotten all about that. And it's a weird segue here. We're kind of making our way into the thing of, well, basically, something I completely forgot about because it's from the beginning of the season, but we did talk about it at great length. Basically, the fact that Jenna wasn't really defending herself against Jessel when she felt offended, but Aaron and Sai picked up that argument. And it is interesting to readdress that because obviously we're seeing different dynamics now at the end of the season. So at the beginning of the season, I kind of felt like, oh, well, they are kind of like standing up for Jenna, and they are like giving, reasonableness where Jessel is being unreasonable. And that still stands true. But I think now that we've watched the season and we've seen how Sai and Aaron are and how they were towards Jessel, it does add a layer there. And it does seem like, yes, they were sticking up for Jenna, but also maybe they were kind of using that. Like, I feel like that became a thing that irritated them, but we talked about this as well. That became a thing that irritated them with Jessel, and it just kind of carried on and escalated through the season, and there became a multitude of issues with Jessel. So that was interesting to hear about. That then segues into Aaron giving this. She gave a very lengthy explanation as to why she was picking apart, which I love that Andy pointed out and used that language, picking apart Jessel's backstory and saying, well, these ladies, I know that they've gone through things and they came from nothing, but you had this and you lived with your uncle and you said you came from nothing. I just don't know why it matters. Like, I understand the distinction that Aaron is making, but I don't think that distinction is lost on us. Like, Jessel's situation is not Sai's, it's not Bryn's. Like, they're all different situations, and I don't believe that Jessel is trying to say that they're the same. So then to that credit, like, I just don't know why it matters that we're sitting here having this discussion, and Erin felt like she had to describe, what her issue was with it, and it kind of just went roundabout. It just was like, I feel like I'm being shamed for how I came up, or basically something like that, and Erin's like, I'm not shaming you, why do you feel like that? And Andy's like, because you're picking apart her backstory. Like, we're just kind of sitting here talking about something that really doesn't matter. And even in discussing, like, Jessel's backstory, we move over to Sai, because obviously Sai had a lot to say about Jessel's description of her backstory, like when she was yelling on that boat, which we've talked about ad nauseum. And she basically says, watching it back, I do like that Sai can recognize things. She's been doing that since part one, but it also felt like in part one she was acknowledging, backpedaling, but then also kind of standing on it and saying, well, that just kind of is what it is. But I feel like she did a little bit better in part two. I would say a lot of it better, actually. I'll be fair and say a lot of it better. She's saying, watching it back, it does seem like they were going really hard on Jessel, so she has some self-awareness, thank God. And then it really bothered me because Jenna's like, something else I just did not agree with. She's like, well, I feel like this was prompted by Andy, and I feel like Andy, which I also enjoyed, prompted Jenna a lot, because Jenna's not going to naturally just jump in and give her perspective. But I think that Jenna she's the wild card, as they've explained her to be, and I agree with that. You don't really know what her perspective is going to be. She's not really clicked up in the group, so you don't really know where she's going to come. And I think that Jenna is operating on the perspective of Jenna. You know what I'm saying? Like, she feels this type of way. She's at the outside looking in of the group, and she's always going to give a singular perspective. So I like that Andy was like probing her basically the entire part two of the reunion and saying, well, Jenna, how do you feel about that? And what is your opinion on that? So, Jenna says, in this part, I just did not agree. And she said this in the season as well, though. She feels like what could have bridged that gap between Jessel telling her story and Erin inside not screaming and yelling is if Jessel would have made a distinction and said, well, your situation is different, but my situation is this, and I'm just saying this because I want to relate to you. Nobody has to do that. You know what I'm saying? Like, why does she need to pander? Obviously, we're having this conversation. The context of all of these conversations during the season where we're trying to get to know each other, they were literally saying it. Sometimes context is implied, but they were literally saying it when they were having these conversations, like, we want to get to know you. So it's obvious that she was giving this information to connect. You know what I'm saying? It doesn't take a revelation in a reunion to figure out, or watching back the season when you were being assholes towards her, to figure out that she was just trying to relate and she didn't have any malintention. So I think it's bullshit to say that she needs to make a distinction and say, just so you know, I'm not trying to compare, but this is my backstory. Come on now, please. Also, like in this moment, like, Jessel didn't fall for it. She's fighting back towards it, but we get UBAH jumping into her defense, which I appreciated. And at that point, we basically kind of get like a UBAH and Jessel tag team against that side of the couch, more so Sai and Erin, obviously. And I like how Jessel was kind of beating down the point to Erin, like, well, girl, at the end of the day, like, when you were going to the ballet with your family, with Brad and Angelina, or whatever the hell she said, she's like, I was giving out newspapers with my mom. Like, so, we do come from different backgrounds. Like, you want to discuss the particulars, it is what it is. And then Erin taking that dig, she's like, well, do you know anything about my past? Which I'm so glad we skated over, because it's like, girl, now you want to talk about having rough times, now you want to relate, go to hell. I do, though, like that we get, like I was saying, I do like that we get a moment of Sai saying, okay, I'm going to admit that I was going hard on Jessel, and, I noticed she didn't mean any harm, and, it wasn't malintended, like, she was just trying to relate, even though I don't think it should have taken all that for her to realize it. I like that she's realizing it. And, I mean, you get this conversation, and Jessel's like, it's fine, I understand, blah, 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 which is great. Like, I was having this conversation with my friend. From a human standpoint, it's great to see people acknowledge things and move forward and not harbor things, but I can understand from a TV entertainment standpoint, it's like, well, why are they just like pandering? And it seems like they're just like, oh, it's fine, blah, blah, blah. So I can also understand then from Brynn, who seems like she's always trying to produce a scene and have a moment. But also, I won't even say it like that, because I do think there's some authenticity in there. I think that that's part of Brynn's personality, but I also think Brynn knows that she's doing a job, and I'm fine with that. So, I appreciate her, and I understood her, and I agree with her when she was saying to Jessel, like, you need to stop apologizing. Like, they've done all this stuff about your marriage. Like, they basically bullied you all season, like, and you're doing this apologizing. And like I said, from a a TV standpoint and even partially a human standpoint, like I get it because it's like I would feel that type of way as well. But when you think of it on the basis of like I'm a human, I want to be a grown adult, I want to move forward, it's really just not worth it. So I understand it on both sides. We then also get, I don't know what the turning point was, but there was another question basically which I asked during the season. You know, Aaron was so upset about Brynn and her engagement party and bringing up the divorce word with Abe, but then she's, you know, talking about and making these insinuations about Jessel's marriage. There was like a fan question about that, a viewer question. And, you know, she's like, I apologize at the end of the day. Like, it was wrong. Like, I was making light of it. So I guess we didn't turn a corner where she's admitting that she insinuated it, but she's characterizing it as like she was making light of it, like she was being funny, but there was nothing funny about it. So, okay. Honestly, as I'm doing this review, I'm realizing I really appreciated this segment because it was a lot of going back and forth between Aaron and Sai, and it wasn't necessarily grouped together. Like sometimes you get like a Beavis and Butthead duo on Housewives, Robin and Giselle, and you group them together at reunions and try to hold them accountable when individually they're not even good at being held accountable. So then when you bring the two mean girls together, you're definitely not going to get anything. So I liked A, that they were separated at least by a person at the reunion, and B, that we were addressing them separately and they were able to acknowledge things and apologize separately. I lived for that. Like, I just thought that that was amazing. And so now we're getting this opportunity for Sai to also apologize for her insinuations and what she was doing as it pertained to Jessel. But then also it's like, well, wait, but there's another piece. And I appreciated that as well. Like, we're not just going to scoop it all up. Because also you really made a big, huge deal about this Vietnam thing. Sai takes accountability and she'll kind of backpedal it, but she also kind of stands in her bullshit. So, you know, she's just like, well, I do think that, you know, it felt like some lying, you know, at the end of the day, but maybe it could have been a misunderstanding. So it feels like she's getting there, but the question still remains, why do you care? And I love that Jessel's like, why are you so invested? Like, what difference does it make? And Sai admits, I was very invested. At the very least, even though she still kind of stood on it, and she's still kind of, she's not, I can't necessarily say she's where she was in the season, but I think she's on her way to figuring it out, and I'll take that from Sai. But I also did like, I feel like another good piece was, and like I said, it could be for TV, it could be for personality, it could be for both. I like that Brynn was holding them accountable and not really allowing them to skate away from things. You need stuff like that. I don't necessarily think that Jessel was going to let them skate away from it, because I think that the same objections that Brynn was raising, Jessel was raising them as well. I just think that they communicate differently. So, you know, either way, but I do still like the support from Brynn, and then, you know, we also get it from UBAH when UBAH's ready. So I appreciated it. We then get these very endearing moments, which I think I always think about timing and editing. So I think that they were very well segmented out, and the timing was good, and the information that we got was really good, especially with the story about Sai's mom. Like, I just really liked having that context and being able to listen to the story and see where it went and where she landed. I thought it was very, very, what stuck with me, what's really still sticking with me, is just thinking about the fact that her mom lived with her. I'm like getting emotional talking about it, but the fact that her mom lived with her prior to passing, and then she, you know, basically her husband wanted her out. It's kind of weird saying that because I don't want to like make accusations, but it's just like her husband wanted her mom out because she was getting drunk, and then, you know, soon after her mom passed, and Sai feels like it's her fault. So I just wonder if there's, not like on a messy note or anything, I'm just curious to know if there's some like pent up resentment that Sai may have against her husband, or if there's any weirdness there, if they had any communication about it. Like, I would be interested to know more about that. And then we also talk a bit about Brynn's upbringing, which, like I said, I liked it during the season, like learning that she was black, because I didn't know that, and hearing about her story of going to a black hair salon. I also didn't know she was from Indiana, and I think that that's cool because I'm from Illinois. So it's always fun to hear about people like from the Midwest like that, you know, I start watching them on TV, stuff like that. It's just interesting to me. But, you know, so it's interesting to get that backstory. I know that there was a lot of discussion online about Bryn's saying that she identified as black, and I didn't really think too much about it when I was watching it on Bravo, and then I went on Twitter and I was seeing the discussion. So then when I watched it on Peacock and I heard the question be asked from a viewer, basically like, well, Bryn, how do you, I don't remember verbatim what was said, but it's basically like, how do you live in how I'm going to characterize it? How do you live in your blackness today? Like, how does that show up for you today? And she essentially said, she identifies as a black woman. Like, it is what it is. So I know that some people weren't really buying that. And so it makes it curious to me to wonder, like, is that a question that was asked, for that intended purpose, because the people feel like she doesn't necessarily identify as black. She was just using that. I don't know, but I do think that was a curious thing. I did then like the moment, it was weird to me because it kind of felt like we were circling back. We talked a bit about Sai and Bryn's relationship in the first part, but we circled back to it, which I didn't mind because we didn't get anywhere in the first part, so fine, why not? And, essentially we find out, and Sai has already spoken to this, but I feel like it was better articulated this time. She says, hey, like, I am quick to anger, and when I get angry, like, I don't really want to talk. I don't have any patience. Like, that's just how I am with grown adults. But she admits that I'm struggling to say that she's working on it, but, in some capacity, she's admitting that she's going to be working on it. This part was not on Bravo, but there was a viewer question asking if Aaron was the most uptight in the group, and Bryn says sometimes, and Aaron seems to be kind of turned off by that. So I'm wondering, like, if that's gonna go anywhere. But it does seem like, there's a thought process that Aaron can be a little bit uptight and a little bit type A, but she spoke to that in the first part of the reunion. But then also they do humanize her. Everybody's kind of in agreement that, she is a considerate person. She just can be a little bit sometimes, and a little bit self-serving, maybe a little bit selfish when it comes to like thoughts and consideration. And they talk a little bit about her being sensitive, and the fact that though that sensitivity lends more to Aaron, lends more to self than it does outwardly. And she does admit, that, she does have problems with that. Like, she is sensitive and she does mess up sometimes, but she apologizes to the ladies for any wrongdoing and she doesn't want to hurt them. So I appreciated that as well. Kind of the same thing as earlier, right? Like, from a human standpoint, I like to see stuff like that because I don't want to watch a show with at the end of the day. Like, you're gonna act a certain type of way. We all have our moments and you're on television, but at the end of the day, I want to know that you're human and you are aware and you know what the heck is going on and you know right from wrong. In this segment, we also get to talk a bit about Aaron and Bryn's relationship, because Bryn was giving that information. And then there was a question asked, which this wasn't on the Bravo part either, but it was mentioned in the first part, kind of, where they were on Watch What Happens Live, and Bryn says that she learned not to trust Aaron. And I didn't remember it at first, but they showed the clip, and I remember watching it because it was the first Watch What Happens Live, and the whole cast was there. So I do remember that. I was just thinking, though, when we hear about stuff on Watch What Happens Live, I think about it as, like, it's just the two guests, and then it's the one, like, maybe Bryn was there with somebody random and she was chopping it up about Aaron. It was that Aaron was there when it was said, and they were doing like a group game thing. So it wasn't even like a messy moment, but you could tell it was something that caught Aaron off guard. And it was like, but they both seemed to kind of pacify that, because I mean, at the end of the day, Bryn was just saying that she learned not to trust Aaron based off of the season premiere when they were talking about the cheese stuff, and Aaron sustains that she didn't say anything about the cheese thing, but Bryn's like, well, I'm not lying, you did say something about the cheese thing. And then they realize it's a miscommunication, which is everything in this group. And so Bryn's like, that's the only reason I said I can't trust you. It wasn't a big deal. And they kind of like sweep it under the rug, and they're like, we're good. Like, it did feel like a weird passive explanation of a relationship. It didn't feel like we're friends and we love each other. And they were basically saying, like, Aaron was saying, we have a mutual respect for each other. Like, we're fine. It is what it is. And it felt like she was about to say, I love her, but it didn't come out because it wasn't going to be authentic. And UBAH slides in there and she's just like, no, girl, like, that's not the truth. Because Aaron's also like, I also feel like that's a key thing too. That's a dead giveaway when somebody's like, we're a lot alike. You know what I'm saying? That's valid, but you're trying to say something there. At the end end of the day, it doesn't have to be negative. That's what I'm saying. But when you're trying to say like, well, we're a lot alike, I think you're acknowledging that you guys butt heads, and the energy there can be a little bit weird. Like I said, right? Like she's not saying, but I love her, because she could have said both. Like, we're a lot alike, we butt heads, but I still love her. She's my sister, blah, blah, blah. But that's not what I was hearing. So I think UBAH clocked that to you, and she's like, girl, BS. Like, y'all are not even a lot alike at the end of the day, because yes, like for instance, y'all both bring information to the group like carrier pigeons, but Bryn will admit it, you will not. And basically, UBAH's issue with Aaron is that Aaron is a gaslighter, and Aaron basically will she I think it all kind of ties in, honestly, for this segment. Like, Aaron will throw that rock and hide her hand. Like, Aaron will sit there, and once there's an issue, she's like, oh, woe is me, woe is me, woe is me. Like, not me, not Aaron, I did nothing wrong. But when it's on the other hand, the lady's like, Aaron, you did this. She's like, it is what it is. So I cannot disagree with UBAH on that one. And I don't think that Aaron is disagreeing. UBAH also brings up, which I get it, but I'll talk about why I didn't like it in the end. She brings up the fact that, Aaron has said bad things about Bryn, allegedly. So, basically don't say that you guys are a lot alike when you talk negatively about Bryn. You guys obviously are not good. And Aaron says, to her credit, she's right. She says, when you're upset with someone, sometimes you lash out and you say things that you shouldn't say. So I apologize if I say things, when I'm upset, that I shouldn't say. And I thought, that could have been a BS explanation, and UBAH could have pushed back, but UBAH didn't push back. So I guess that was valid. And so I'm like, UBAH, like, valid point for you to bring it up, but it does make sense if they're not in a good place. Yeah, I'm sure she did say some negative things about Bryn. So context is everything. The biggest part of the reunion, finally, and what I really appreciated, because I feel like UBAH, I won't even say she got lost a bit in the season, but it's just like we didn't get as much from UBAH as we did from the other ladies. So it was nice to actually see her story and her personality and her perspective shine here in the reunion. What I didn't like is, and this happens in a lot of the reunions, and I can understand that this is the formula, but I don't like it because there's some mess at the end of it. Don't pose a question about me. Don't start a segment by posing a question as it pertains to me, but posing that question to everybody else but me, right? Like, we're going to start this segment. We want to talk about the phone thing and the sunglasses thing. And you're going to start it off by saying, does anybody here feel like UBAH overreacted? UBAH's sitting right here in the room. So I don't like how that conversation started to begin with, and I feel like UBAH clocked that T. And everybody, it could have been the editing, but it felt like there was a hesitance there to answer. Not a strong hesitance, not like it took forever. But, certain people did end up raising their hand, and I like that Jessel audibly said, I don't think that she was overreacting, and I appreciate that. And I like then, because there started to be some chatter, because I think that everybody noticed that there was some dissension there, and they're like, well, things are getting weird. So it kind of be like, everybody was doing that, and it was like, no, I'll talk at the end of the day. And I appreciated that, because have some respect for her. She's sitting right there. If you're gonna have a conversation about her, and this is her package, and address her then and ask her, did she overreact? If you want to ask the group, fine, I guess. It's still going to be messy, but I wouldn't open up the conversation like that. Like, what? Another thing I didn't like was, again, on the surface, I like that Jenna is giving her perspective, because she's not going to, I think she has a distinct perspective, like I said, but I don't like what she was saying. She says without context, and I understood what she was saying, but I don't like it. She's saying without the context of knowing why UBAH was upset about her phone, it felt like she was overreacting. But if you listen to that, there's literally an issue in there. Nobody needs to explain to you why they're acting the way that they're acting. And UBAH, to her credit, when she explained the day, she was reacting to Aaron, which I think people are forgetting, or at least Jenna, because when she was upset with Aaron, not that she told us, but you could see it, she was not trying to be around Aaron. Like, she wasn't speaking to her. Like, she said she missed breakfast. Like, nothing was going on. So they didn't even communicate until the point that Aaron was being petty, and she's like, don't say my name. And UBAH got into her face reacting. Was that a good reaction? Should it have happened? No. But I'm not going to tell somebody that they should not feel passionate or upset about something when they're reacting to something that somebody else did to them. I'm not going to invalidate somebody else's feelings because I'm not them and I don't know how that affects them. And we're talking about context. The context here is that UBAH was reacting at the end of the day to everything that was occurring. Her phone was taken, so her reaction was to pull herself back from Aaron and not engage with her. And then when she was doing that and trying to protect her peace and trying to calm down, Aaron still proceeded to be petty and she's like, don't say my name. She confronted UBAH. So UBAH again is now reacting. So I'm not going to police that, and I don't believe that Jenna should have as well. Again, here UBAH is explaining that she felt gaslit by Aaron because at the end of the day, Aaron is, the biggest thing is that Aaron did that confessional where she's saying like, this is the worst altercation that I've been in. I don't remember if she said the word altercation, but this is the worst thing that I've been through in my life. And that really hit everybody on social media. And that's why I like the live tweets, because I didn't necessarily think about it that way. But seeing that perspective, I can understand that, like, girl, that's very dramatic. And I can also understand being somebody on TV, even being somebody of color on TV, and having that narrative out there like, oh, this is the worst situation I've been in, like, that could hurt someone. Honestly, like, I don't know if it would affect me the same way, but I can see how it would have affected UBAH, and it's obviously affecting her in a very negative way. She didn't like that, and she also didn't like Jenna saying that she saw another side to UBAH. Like, you can tell UBAH feels a very passionately about her integrity, and so when that's put into question, it makes her feel passionate. It makes her feel some type of way. Aaron, I feel like, I will say that Aaron, she has given some acknowledgement to how she can act. We've already talked about that. But she doesn't necessarily admit to gaslighting, but who would admit to gaslighting? But the thing is that she kind of deflects and then says, well, I feel like I was being ganged up on while we were on the trip. And of course, Sai jumps in and she's like, I do feel like there was a gang up on Aaron in the hot tub. So I don't mind her adding that specificity because you can tell she did it for a reason. Like, in general, no, she wasn't ganged up on, but in the hot tub, I do feel like she was being ganged up on. I'm fine with that because I also feel like in the first part of the reunion, they acknowledged that they kind of ganged up on Jenna on that same trip. So fine, if we're doing that across the board, then I'm not upset about it. But I don't like the fact that Aaron is deflecting from UBAH's issue, because we already know that you felt ganged up on in the hot tub. That's why you started crying during the episode, during the season. And that's why they comforted you during the episode, during the season. We already saw that. So whatever. Honestly, I really liked how this package was panning out because it still felt like UBAH was able to address people individually, and this time it was more so Aaron and then Jenna, and she's kind of going through the motions with these things and getting it out. There were portions, because all of it was semantics at the end of the day. Like, we were talking about semantics. Like, we were talking about UBAH's perspective, her point of view, and things that bother her, that are individualistic to her. So obviously she had to explain them to a certain extent to make it make sense, because it's only it pertains to UBAH. So there were portions where it felt like, okay, oh my God, like when you're talking semantics, like, wow, we're kind of going over the same thing. I get it, but that's something that she needed to get out, and we're at the reunion for her to do that, and she was probed to do it. Andy is asking her these questions. So at this point, this is when I didn't like when Brynn was jumping in. Like, at first I was like, I like when Brynn is jumping in and kind of cutting the bullshit. Like, you can tell she was kind of cutting the dead air in the conversations earlier, but now it feels like it seems like she has the same intention with this, but it's misplaced, right? Because, like I said, this is something that is particular to UBAH, so nobody can speak to it, and that's what we're talking about. So it's like, read the room. We're talking about the fact that you guys should not be policing the way that UBAH is reacting, and now Brynn is trying to monopolize the conversation that has nothing to do with her. It has to do with UBAH. I did think it was interesting. We get the question about the angry black woman thing that UBAH brought up during the season, and I liked that, but I thought it was interesting that the other two black women in the room didn't have anything to say. Like, well, Brynn wasn't asked for whatever reason, but Andy did ask Sai and UBAH, and Sai kind of stuttered for 2 seconds and then said, well, I'm just going to pass it to UBAH because it has more to do with her. I wonder, is there something behind that? Because I feel like she did that during the episode as well. Like she kind of seemed like she didn't want to talk about it. So I'm curious. But I like that Uba kept it very cut and dry. She said at the end of the day, like that angry black woman thing, she's like, I'm not angry. At the end of the day, I'm not an angry person. I'm a passionate person, and things bother me and things upset me. Now, if I do get angry with you, then that means that you deserved it at the end of the day. And I think that that's completely valid. I've never really heard, like when it comes to obviously the angry black woman thing, the stereotype, that's a conversation across the board, but I've never really heard an answer to it like that, and I lived for it. And again, addressing these ladies individually, Uba gets to have a conversation with Jenna, and she's like, look, you know, I felt some type of way that you said you were Team Aaron and the whole, you know, sunglasses debacle. And Jenna's like, you know, at the end of the day, I didn't have all the information. I understand where you're coming from. It is what it is. Finally, which I appreciated, we get Uba basically explaining, because at first I didn't understand when she's like, nobody had my back, because we kept seeing that clip. But when she explained it, I understood. She went around the room and she's like, these are different instances where I've had you guys' back. And then when it came to this instance with Aaron, a lot of people were mute. But the people that were giving their opinion, like Jenna, you're saying you're Team Aaron, and now everybody's saying they feel like I overreacted. But you guys are not even taking into account that I'm the closest to Aaron in this group. So this was a personal issue that I had with Aaron. I felt like we were not going to come back from it, and we were not going to be friends. So it was paining me to have this issue. It's not like I'm just having the issue and it's a throwaway and I want to kick and fight and yell and scream. I want to be upset. I don't want to be upset, especially with somebody that's supposed to be my friend. I don't want to feel like my friend is gaslighting me. And then even in that instance, nobody else has my back, so I'm not getting any support. So I completely understood where Uba was coming from, and I like that everybody made an effort at that point to come to her side and talk to her and calm her down. I appreciated that. I feel like the thing that I talked about in part one comes full circle, right? When I said, you know, they made it a point to put into the edit in part one where Andy was saying, you know, we're here to put things on the table and push things forward. I do appreciate that it came full circle, and he said it at the end of the reunion, and I felt like in part two of the reunion we were doing this. He basically said, you know, here is where you guys need to realize, you know, we're going to leave everything here. Everything that happened, we're going to discuss it. We're going to have a conversation about it here. We're going to put it on the table, and we're going to leave it here and figure out how to move forward. I appreciated that because, like I said in the first part, I'm all about a next step. What is the next step, right? Not necessarily that we're going to resolve it, we're going to be best friends, we're going to kiss and make up, but at the end of the day, have we took a next step? Have we turned the corner on that situation, or are we still talking about the same thing? Y'all still talking about that? I thought that this second part of the reunion saved the day, and I thought that it was fantastic, and I liked the attention and the time that was given to each of these topics. I thought it was weird, the stark differences between the Bravo version and the Peacock version, but I think that both were good. I think that you have to watch both to get the full context, basically of what I've explained here, but just as a full context of the reunion, I don't know. I almost want to say that the Peacock one had a little bit more tea because they had stuff where they talked about, they asked questions about Sai's marriage, but there wasn't really anything there, but Andy seemed curious about it. So there were little tidbits in both. I thought it was good. And, you know, I am now back on my soapbox that I do feel like it was a really good season. And I feel like everything came full circle. And I have an understanding and I have closure on every single thing. Like Uba said, there are no more elephants in the room. So I'm excited now fully to move forward for next season. And I cannot wait to see y'all there. So, thanks for watching.